Welcome to Derm Power, where policy meets practice, hosted by the California Dermatology Advocacy Network. In each episode, we examine the legislative and regulatory forces shaping dermatologic care in California and what they mean for physicians and patients. Because protecting patient care means protecting the profession. Today's host is Dr. Haas, CDAN president.
If you switch on social media, or even if you are at your nearest shopping center, you probably will see a med spa. And these are businesses that offer medical procedures like Botox or botulism toxin, filler injections, lasers, or skin and body treatments. These procedures used to be available only through a dermatologist or a plastic surgeon's clinic. These days, med spas are offering these procedures often not by a dermatologist or a plastic surgeon or even a physician. In some cases, and in some states, these are offered by someone who isn't even medically trained. The services that these facilities offer can also include things like IV hydration, peptide injections, and even surgical procedures like liposuction and fat transfer. This change has happened only over the last 15 years or so, but there are many consequences to it that haven't really caught up with these changes. Not only is regulation of these businesses not being enforced in most states, in some states, there aren't even any regulations in the books. Now, the state of California classifies these services as medical procedures, and as such, they can only be done by or under the supervision of a physician. And this is done intentionally to keep patients safe. But are patients really safe in this environment? What happens in California? For our guest today, an encounter such as this one at a medical spa in California almost cost her life. Amma's story has been well published throughout the media because it is so dramatic and devastating. But what hasn't been discussed is what happened in the aftermath. Not just the circumstances that led to her injury, but why such injuries continue to happen here in California and to other patients across the country. Can anything be done about this? I'm Dr. Haas, and you are listening to Derm Power, the podcast of the California Dermatology Advocacy Network. Amma, welcome to the show.
Yay, thanks for having me.
You know, as many times as I have heard your story, it is still shocking and horrifying to me as the first time I heard it. As a dermatologist, and I think for many of us in the dermatology community, it's just devastating to hear about your journey. Take us back. Tell us what was in your mind and what happened.
Well, long story short, I was new to Los Angeles. I had started a new job. I was 23. This was back in 2021. And I had experience with getting B12 shots already. And it's something that I enjoyed. I felt like it did give me a boost in energy and metabolism. And so I was searching for an area near me or like a spa near me to inject B12 shots. And so um, ironically enough, I was actually messaged by said med spa offering me B12 shots. And I was like, wow, great. What are the odds? I was looking for a med spa. I think looking back, it should have been a little suspicious that a med spa was doing outreach, especially to on Instagram to like creators like myself. Um, but anyways, I was just like, okay, great. You offer B12 injections. I'd love to come by and schedule an appointment. And I show up to this beautiful med spa. It was fully glass surrounding. Everything looked very professional on their Instagram. They boasted licensed and insured and just made themselves appear very professional and medical. And I arrived to the spa. Everything looks good. I don't have a doubt in my mind that anything is being, you know, that there's any like practice out of scope essentially. Nor did I really know about that as a consumer. Again, I was 23. I just trusted that if there is a med spa or anyone doing or offering these kinds of procedures, that there is some kind of regulation and checks and balances system to make sure that it's qualified people actually offering these services. I was completely ignorant to the fact, as most people are. And so I'm, sitting there talking with the girl, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, we actually have this incredible compound that's way better than just B12 shots. It's B12 and deoxycholic acid with other vitamins." And I was like, "Okay, awesome. Sounds great." Like she really sold me on it. She told me how happy other people were with the compound that she had injected into them. And I was like, great, let's do it. I'm down to give it a try. Completely unaware of what a flesh-eating skin disease even was, or that it would be possible, and that counterfeit products were even a thing. I was just completely oblivious. And within the first 24 hours of getting the injections, I was shaking. My body was running a fever. I immediately became sick. I knew something was wrong, and everything went downhill from there. Within a matter of weeks, not well, less than a week, honestly, my skin started to open where I had been injected, and it was spreading. And I was in the hospital getting different biopsies and tests, and nobody knew what was wrong with me.
So you didn't really know what you got, and you didn't really know who gave it to you, who that person was, what kind of training that person had had, what kind of licensure there was. Were there any signs posted suggesting that there were physicians on site?
Yeah, they had fake certificates printed out and posted on their walls and on their website. They definitely did everything that they could to make themselves appear legit. That's also why I didn't have any concern.
What happened then?
So I am going to different hospitals, dermatologists, doctors to help diagnose what's going on. I only knew about necrosis at the time. And I was like, is this necrosis? Like, is my skin tissue just dying? Like, what's going on here? And then, the hospital was like, no, it doesn't look like necrosis. You're gonna have to go see a dermatologist. So I go to a dermatologist. I get a bunch of biopsies and testing with the dermatologist. And at that point in time, all of the tests came back negative, just inconclusive, and they didn't know whether or not to put me on antibiotics or steroids, whether it was like a response, like an immune response or like an allergic response to the injection, or if it was bacterial, right? So, initially, because all of the tests were inconclusive, they recommended that I go on steroids. So that's when I went on steroids, and that actually turned out to make the bacteria, the Mycobacterium abscessus, grow extremely fast and spread throughout my entire upper body at a rate that it otherwise wouldn't have. We quickly saw, well, not quickly, it was about 2 to 3 weeks of being on steroids before we realized that that just wasn't enough. And finally, other test results came back. There was a doctor at UCLA that, had recommended that we test for mycobacterium. And finally, that test result came back positive. Mycobacterium is extremely difficult to test for. You have to send it to a specific hospital. It's Washington or National Jewish. And so, because you have to send it to a specific lab for testing, there is it's really difficult to actually find out what's going on before it's too late. So, uh, at that point in time, my entire body is covered in sores. My flesh is open. It's continuing to spread, and my body is just kind of eating itself alive. I am literally like on my deathbed. I'm extremely sick. I can't function. I can't shower. I can't do anything myself. I'm just completely immobile. And at that point in time, I'm checked into the hospital. That was May 19th, and exactly 1 month after getting the injections. And I was in the hospital until September 1st. In the hospital, I was having 2 hours of wound care daily, 8 hours of IV antibiotics given to me, multiple debridement awake surgeries. So general surgery would come in and do debridement and try to get as much active infection out of those skin pockets as possible. It was extremely excruciating. It was on my back, my arms, my stomach, and so I couldn't really move much. And then the side effects of the medications and how aggressive the medications that I was being given through my port were so harsh that I began to lose my hearing, and I had the most painful arthritis throughout all of my bones. And so there was a while there where I really just had the worst muscle atrophy, bone pain throughout my body, and like early osteoporosis type symptoms. And so it was just extremely difficult, and it was really challenging for the doctors and the entire team of doctors to stop this bacteria from spreading. I'm told all the time how lucky I am to have my arms and to even be alive. And I'm lucky that we didn't have to remove large chunks of skin just to stop the infection, because there are other cases of mycobacterium where people have had to have their entire abdomen removed, or, large chunks of their arms and legs from similar procedures. And I'm extremely lucky that even as incredibly difficult as it was, that we were able to stop the infection. And then I was released from the hospital September 1st. I was put on home health care. I had nurses coming to my home every single day to help me administer my 8 hours of IV antibiotics a day. And I continued treatment for 2.5 years.
You're right. We're lucky to have you.
Yeah.
That's an incredible, incredible journey. What do you think about how this industry is marketed toward you and the rest of us as consumers? I mean, really, uh, the industry is sort of saying that anyone can do this, right? Anyone can get into the med spa space. It's a business enterprise. There are industries that have built around the medical spa industry to take someone with no medical training and allow them to put together a business that barely meets the minimum letter of the law. And, because there are even courses now which deliberately teach non-derm physicians or nurse practitioners or physicians assistants and nurses to do this. And we're seeing efforts to put these products in the hands of non-medically trained individuals, which sounds like what may have been the situation for you. When you, I'm sure, called the spa back and said, "Hey, I don't feel well. Hey, I'm sick. Hey, I'm really sick." What was their response to you?
Oh, your body must be having an allergic reaction. Like this has nothing to do with us, and that it wasn't their fault.
As this whole process went along for you, did you seek any sort of answers, retribution, legal aid, reporting? What did you do?
Absolutely. So, I mean, immediately I hired lawyers to help me with the discovery, right? That's how through the legal discovery is how we found out that they ordered these products through Alibaba and that they were from China. And the California Department of Public Health and Safety, during my hospital visit, also scheduled an investigation on this med spa, meaning because they scheduled it, because it wasn't an undercover investigation, and because it gave the spa time to hide all evidence of them practicing out of scope or injecting or using these non-FDA approved products on people, there was no evidence that was found during the investigation to like even incriminate them. But then also, I mean, I went to lengths to email and contact every single district and general attorney of Los Angeles to help me with my case, and nobody responded to me
Do you have any thoughts as to why that was?
because there's just no process in place.
Well, and in addition, we know that when it comes to safety, this industry is not only silent, not just the lawyers, but the industry is silent and actually in many cases actively opposes any legislative action that might add some sort of a basic safety measure to some of these businesses. There was a med spa bill last year in Texas that was essentially defeated by AmSpa, which is the medical spa lobby that was put in place in the Texas legislature following the death of a young woman from IV hydration.
Yes.
So, legislation is something that we really are going to need, I think, to focus on to help people like you in this situation. There was an interesting quote from John Oliver on his show about med spa safety, and he said, quote, "This is an industry that has the appearance of medicine, but none of the safeguards." And as you said, when you look at the various types of advertising, it almost seems like the med spa industry has made efforts to let the public know that these services aren't actually medicine, right? They're not medicine at all. So it really seems that toxins and fillers and injections in the mind of the med spa industry are no different and are safe and is easy to procure and is easy to administer as sunscreens and makeup.
Yeah.
And that clearly is not true. Uh, how has the social response to your situation been?
I was really scared for a long time to talk about what happened to me, and I do think that my biggest motivator was the lack of justice, right? The lack of anybody taking this seriously, the lack of, police or criminal involvement, and then the lack of, my lawyers just weren't able to do anything. There was nothing to collect on. She knew the loopholes, and she even told me, the owner of the med spa told me, "Good luck suing me. My husband's a lawyer, and I'm totally protected." She knew what she needed to do to make sure that if anything were to go wrong, she would never be held liable. There are true loopholes here that a lot of these med spa owners are well aware of in order to avoid and evade any kind of responsibility if something like this were to happen, right? And because there is no guarantee that if you call the police for somebody, practicing illegally or practicing out of scope, there is no guarantee that they will, pursue criminal charges or even take the case seriously, right? You are in the hands of luck. And so once I discovered that, and once the lawyers finally got that in my head that I am pretty much on my own here, I was like, okay, I need to share my story because I don't want this to happen to other people. So in the beginning, I was extremely scared, and I thought that I was going to get a ton of backlash for not only how I looked and what my body, because my body looked extremely disturbing and just scary. And I don't know how I even had the courage and vulnerability to like share those gruesome images. And those gruesome images actually are nothing compared to what it really looked like when I was in the hospital. I would totally get my content flagged if I ever provided like the real images. But um, I was just, I had already lost everything. I was in rock bottom, so I didn't care. And I was just like, if I'm gonna do anything, I'm gonna help other people at least ask the right questions before being fooled the way that I was fooled or taken advantage of. And so that's where it came from. And I was really shocked to see that there was an overwhelming positive response from people. And I was thanked by many for helping educate themselves. Many people even messaged me afterwards, like, oh my God, I had an appointment to go get my lips done or to go get XYZ done. And after doing research, I found out that they weren't licensed. I found out that these people are actually practicing out of scope. They're not even doctors, whatever it may be. And so a ton of people thanked me for the awareness that I was spreading, but then also a ton of victims reached out to me and they said, "You're the only person that is actually talking and speaking out about the fact that these med spa injuries happen so commonly and so frequently. And when they do happen, you're basically helpless. You don't really have much help, and there's no clear path on what to do to seek justice when something like this happens to victims." And so I think I helped a lot of victims feel empowered. So many victims have shared their stories with me, and um, yeah, I think I've helped a lot of people through sharing, but it definitely wasn't easy. And there was also a lot of victim blaming, like, you deserved this. You know, you're the one who went to go get B12 shots. You looked fine before. Why did you go get B12 shots? And I can't get across enough that this wasn't about how I looked. I wanted to feel better. I wanted B12 shots. I wanted something that was advertised to me as a young girl to make me feel better. And we fall for that all the time in many other areas of advertising and other products as well. So, the fact that I was just like extremely unlucky, uh, but still blamed nonetheless. Um, and it doesn't matter even if you are getting like a cosmetic procedure like breast implants or whatever lipo, and an injury happens to you or whatever the case may be, you don't deserve to be blamed in that situation because, and I always state it like this, you know, the women with the most beautiful bodies and the most aesthetic, faces who have had cosmetic procedures done are always praised for their beauty and how amazing and incredible they look. But then the people who are victims of an accident or malpractice are essentially blamed for being vain for going and seeking something like that. And that's completely unfair.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an industry. The global medical spa market is valued, at least in 2024, was valued at some $21 billion and is projected to reach something like 49 to $82 billion by the early 2030s. So this is an industry that is going to have to really focus on their messaging in order to get that kind of revenue. And, there is a constant messaging, I think, for people to look a certain way and seek these types of treatments. And that's not to judge who wants or doesn't want such treatments. That's not the point. The point is that you, like many other men and women, are victims here of this system. This is it's a direct and an indirect marketing that's driving people to seek out these services. And obviously, there is economic motivation to get these services, sometimes at the best price possible, right? And this can lead to people getting these services performed by lesser and lesser trained individuals. You had mentioned scope. You've mentioned that several times. Over the past 30 years, there's been a push really to replace doctors and non-physician nurse practitioners and physician's assistants. Now, when non-physicians work under physician's supervision, the system is fine. The doc is the captain of the ship. Safety and quality are all maintained, but there have been, particularly in California, major legislative and regulatory efforts to expand what non-physicians can do here in the state. So the thing to remember is that non-physicians get maybe 5% of the training of physicians. So they might feel that they can perform a basic cosmetic procedure, but that's not a replacement for the medical knowledge and the expertise. Frankly, it takes a long time to be a physician, and it takes a very long time to become a dermatologist or a plastic surgeon who has received extra training, particularly in the aesthetic arena. But the med spa industry sort of sees non-physicians as a cheap way to get around the corporate practice of medicine laws and to get to obtain prescription medications. The industry has supported this scope of practice for non-physicians and has continued to promote them as the experts in what is essentially dermatology and aesthetic surgery. And this is a problem because that's just not the case. Docs can make mistakes. We all do. But when that happens, um, physicians try to recognize it and take corrective action. If an injury like yours had happened in a physician's office, for instance, the practice probably would have been shuttered. The doc would have likely had their license suspended, or there would have been, or there would have been enormous professional liability. And if there would have been a settlement, and I suspect there would have been, and if it was large enough, it would have been registered on a national database.
Exactly.
So, we dermatologists and plastic surgeons deal with uh, the complications that arise from non-physicians that are created by them. Sometimes the non-physicians who aren't supervised have made a medical error and they don't even know that they did. They don't know what they don't know. And the legislatures just don't seem to have wrapped their minds around the danger that can happen from a lack of training. And the nursing boards are just not equipped to deal and to assess what is the quality of a cosmetic procedure performed by a non-physician because these are actually the practice of medicine. So physician supervision is probably going to be the solution to some of these unsafe scope expansions. Tell us what happened to the spa that you went to after all of this had happened to you.
I mean, they were lightly investigated by the California Department of Public Health and Safety. But beyond that, nothing happened. They were never forced to stop practicing. There was no licensing to revoke. There was nobody to report to, because those things don't exist. And so, how is someone supposed to report that, hey, there's a med spa that is completely fraudulently practicing and that they have no um, medical practitioners or anybody with any kind of licensing? You can't. You're stuck. There's nobody to report to. Even if I were to report this to the Board of Medicine or whatever, they would say, well, okay, these people aren't in our network. We have no control here. There's nothing that we can do about these people. So yeah, nothing ended up happening to them. They have been able to continue to expand under other names and expand their business. And they actually are one of those companies that do those injector trainings, and they teach other non-licensed uh, people how to replicate the same procedures.
Yeah, and I think you have just well illustrated several issues that we have here in California. The complexity of our existing agency regulation, you got it in one there. If you ask the attorneys, and we have just asked you, and you have beautifully illustrated the fact that med spas are overseen by a bunch of state agencies, including the Secretary of State and the Medical Board and the California Department of Public Health and others. So it's hard for you, the patient or the consumers, to figure out what agency you go to if you want to file a complaint because you've had an injury or a problem has happened to you. There is no requirement for a med spa to display a sign in their office, which makes us wonder what signs that they put in the office that you were in to give patients the basic information about where you can go if you have an injury or you have a concern. And this absolutely is a requirement that we have in a physician's office. You will see those posted in every physician's office.
And that's what needs to change, because there is no reason why, if I were to walk into a med spa today, I wouldn't be able to have access to whether or not they have insurance, whether or not they have a medical director on site, whether or not any of the people that are inside of the med spa are actually licensed physicians. There is no way for me as a consumer to know if any of these things are true or false, actually.
Yeah, very true. And yeah, one of the other issues that we need to deal with in California is supervision of a practice by physicians. There are a lot of docs, many of whom are actually not formally trained in these cosmetic medical procedures, who lease their medical license out to become the quote unquote medical director so that someone else can open the medical spa. And that someone may not have any medical training whatsoever. Again, this gets us back to the fallacy that cosmetic that cosmetic medical procedures are not actually medical procedures, as of course we know that they are. We need to have enforcement, uh, more direct supervision, and everyone in the practice needs to be trained in the procedure that they perform. So that means the medical director and everybody that is doing these procedures, and that training needs to be documented. These businesses offer actual medical services, and they need to align their business practice just like those of every other medical clinic. Also, med spas need to carry professional liability insurance with minimum coverages.
Yes.
Did not happen in your case, right?
No.
So you didn't know who it was who actually did your injections, right? Did they say I am a
Nurse.
something? No.
No, she said that she was a nurse.
She said she was a nurse.
Yeah.
All right. But we didn't know what kind of nurse. Was there any physician, a supervisory person in the clinic at all that you saw?
Yeah.
No. Okay. Well,
That happens a lot. Even as you just mentioned, like these medical directors, they'll, slap their license and never come to the med spa. They live 100 miles away. They never visit. They have no supervision. And then, who knows if the person actually in the med spa is actually a, physician's assistant or a nurse practitioner or whatever. You just have no way of knowing.
and sometimes even if you ask, you can't get that information.
Exactly.
You had mentioned previously that one of the suggestions that you have made in your outreach to people and to other consumers is that people need to know the qualifications of who it is who's performing their procedures. And when you go on social media, you see nurses are calling themselves nurse injectors, expert injectors, or experts of whatever sort of procedure that they're talking about. And in the medical space, you actually can see the same thing happening with nurse practitioners, calling themselves primary care providers or a nurseologist. Some nurse practitioners who get their doctorate are calling themselves doctor on their websites and in their clinics. And boy, is that confusing.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. Knowing the credentials of whoever it is who's providing your care or doing your procedure is absolutely crucial. And making sure that those credentials are clearly put forth to the patient or the consumer is also critical. Here in California, we call this title transparency, although in some venues they'll call it truth in advertising, truth in medical advertising. There was a study that was done in California in 2024 that basically showed patients just don't understand the meaning and the differences between these titles. Some of these people, the people in the survey, couldn't distinguish a nurse practitioner from a physician. So I think further education, and further transparency is something that I think would really help the community.
I mean, it's needed even after everything that I've been through and all the people that I've talked to and the experts, and I still get confused. I still don't know who is actually allowed to be doing what in what state.
Absolutely. Do you have any last thoughts as someone who experienced something like this in California? What you would say to someone who comes to you and says, gee, I'm looking at getting a cosmetic procedure. What would you tell them to do? And what would you tell the California dermatologic community with respect to what we need to work on to see that situations like this don't happen to anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple solutions, right? Like on the consumer side, I would encourage the consumer to make sure that there is actually a medical director that is on site, that visits that establishment, that assists the people that are, on site working and facilitating these kinds of procedures. Then obviously in ensuring that the the rank or the licensing of the person administering that procedure is in line with what the state's laws are. That's hard to do though. But yeah, making sure that it is actually a nurse, and then of course that they have liability insurance. If they don't have insurance and something goes wrong, you are completely on your own. And those are like the top three: medical director, making sure that they're actually licensed and practicing ethically, and then that they have insurance. Being able to verify that information is nearly impossible. I've asked multiple med spas, hey, do you have insurance? And I've literally been met with the response, I think so. How are you gonna, you don't even know if you have insurance? That should be posted on the wall, or there should be some way for me to verify what kind of insurance that you have, that it's not expired, that whatever, right? So those are the top three. Beyond that, I would say I wish there was like a type of like accreditation system where, you know, I can know that this med spa has been verified and by some larger body that approves their practices, the people that operate, the types of procedures that they're doing, basically just reassuring the consumer that they're ethically practicing. That's so needed. Again, like we know that restaurants and many other establishments are more heavily regulated than med spas. I wish there was a governing body going out med spa to med spa and saying, "Hey, where's this? Where's that? Are you guys even cleaning your instruments and materials? What's your sanitation procedure?" Like that just doesn't exist, and that's a real issue with me. And so, I mean, if there's anything that the like California Dermatology Board and what you guys could do is maybe partner with these ethical practices that are actually doing things by the book and doing things the right way, and maybe partner up to assure consumers that it's safe to go to these groups, but it's not safe to go to the other establishments potentially. Because it's going
So,
to take a while for the law to catch up and have any kind of checks and balances system. And I think that it's going to be put in the hands of like the actual, yeah, it's going to be put in the hands of the doctors and the medical practitioners that do things ethically to kind of fend for themselves and also protect the consumers in the space from going to the bad guys.
so what you're saying essentially is we need to create and enforce industry standards.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We would like to invite our listeners to follow Bea at her YouTube site, Beyond Skin Deep, and also across her social media platform. And Bea, I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about what's on all of those vehicles.
So the name of my YouTube channel is Beyond Skin Deep, and you can follow me across all social medias at Beatriz.Amma. And yeah, I'm really excited because I've been able to take my advocacy work and me spreading awareness to the next level. And I'm not only sharing my story, but other victims' stories on my YouTube channel. But I've also created a swimwear line to help women with skin conditions like me, or, I have tons of scars, and not everybody feels comfortable in their body. And I think, summertime can be really triggering for a lot of people with similar, medical injuries or just bodies like mine. And so to be able to help other people feel comfortable in their body and accept their body is also a major part of my mission.
I want to thank you for coming onto our program and for being as open and honest and candid about your situation. I think that we have learned a great deal, and kudos to you for being willing to take your story public.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
It was my pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Derm Power is a production of the California Dermatology Advocacy Network. CDAN is a registered 501c6 organization representing the hardworking board-certified dermatologists in California. Thank you all for your amazing work. Please make sure to follow CDAN on all our social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, so that you never miss an episode of Derm Power. If today's episode sharpened your understanding of how policy impacts practice, then we invite you to join CDAN, especially if you are a board-certified or retired dermatologist. Learn more about our work at www.cadermadvocacy.org. Advocacy isn't optional, and CDAN is dedicated to protecting our patients and dermatologist-led care in California. See you next time.